Welcome to the NWI.com Political Roundtable. For Thursday, January 12th, I'm Robert Blaszkiewicz, Assistant Managing Editor of the Times. Joining with me today, Mark Kiesling, Times columnist. And Mark, you've been writing a lot this week about the federal investigation into the Sheriff's Department.
I learned over the weekend, and I was able to confirm later, that the FBI did, in fact, serve subpoenas on the Lake County Sheriff's Department last Friday. They were looking for computers and paper records relating to the commissary department, and my understanding is that this may also spread into some of the drug unit. So it looks like the probe is expanding a little bit. This tells me one thing, is that you've got someone inside the department who was high-ranking, who knows where all the bodies are buried, and my guess is that's Joe Comstar. Joe has been indicted and has pleaded guilty.
One of three
indicted.
That has been indicted so far.
Right, and there were three others that were named, and of those, one of them has been exonerated and is back on the department. So you've still got two hanging out there, but they're two fairly high-ranking officers, including the former police chief Marko Kiesling. Reports are this week that Kiesling is looking into potentially suing the county for defamation of character, but that'll be a fairly interesting attempt on his part to be. The feds don't release stuff unless they're pretty sure of what they're doing. So I think he's treading on fairly thin ice there. Now, personally, I know Marko, and he seems to be a nice guy, but he may have gotten caught up in something that's bigger than he is. On the other hand, he may just be a witness.
Yeah, and obviously, we really don't know.
We don't know at this point whether or not he is a person of interest, as the police like to say, or whether he's just going to be a witness. And there's also the possibility that he is both a person of interest and a potential witness. So, there's the possibility that they've worked out some kind of deal with him, where we don't charge you, but we need your cooperation, because a lot of, from my understanding, a lot of what he's accused of doing is pales in comparison to some of the other things that have been going on within the Sheriff's Department.
Obviously, there's a lot of questions still hanging out there, and we really don't know. We don't know much beyond what has been spelled out in the indictments, the three indictments.
And we probably won't for a while, although we continue to hear that there are indictments that were supposed to come down.
And those indictments were primarily centered on gun running, allegations of gun running, basically, through the Sheriff's Department.
Right.
Using, purchasing, guns were purchased through the Sheriff's Department, using Sheriff's Department letterhead, and then basically sold off.
And so, a lot of them sold off on eBay. One of the guns was traced to a shooting in Mississippi, in which the purchaser of the gun is alleged to have taken shots at a police officer as he approached his home. The police officer, fortunately, was not killed.
Yeah.
And some of the guns have ended up in places as remote as Afghanistan, where unfortunately they are supposedly being used against U.S. troops.
Okay. Well, we'll obviously keep an eye on any developments, and you'll be writing about those developments as they happen.
Yes, I certainly will.
Let's shift gears here and talk about the topic that we've been talking about the past few weeks, which is right to work.
And that will continue to be a topic, I think.
And the impact it's had on this session of the General Assembly, which has been like fits and start. Democrats finally showed up and they opened the session, but then they promptly kind of decided not to show up for a subsequent session. Basically, what it looks like they're doing is trying to stall the proceedings. The Republicans are trying to push through the right to work law, and Democrats are trying to basically prevent it from happening so quickly.
You know, unfortunately, I kind of look at this as an outsider, and I say, boy, this looks like two groups of kids on a schoolyard who are just fighting out to see who's stronger. You know, it's like my dad can beat up your dad. You know, that kind of thing, and it's like a lot of the Republican push comes just from saying, hey, we're in the driver's seat now, and we want this right to work law, and if you don't like it, that's too bad. And the Democrats are saying, well, if you don't want to play by the way I want to play, I'm going to take my ball and I'm going to go home.
Right.
So I don't really have a whole lot of sympathy for either side.
Right. So, well, I mean the whole it's a law that's been put forth under the guise of economic development. Studies have shown kind of it's a kind of a murky picture. Some studies say, oh yes, it'll create jobs. Other studies say it'll depress wages. But you can do both. I mean, you can do both.
Those are not mutually exclusive.
Exactly.
I mean, you can create jobs that have lower wages.
But if you depress wages, if people have less money to spend, that's less money to spend in local restaurants, less money to spend in local shops.
Right. Of course.
And ultimately, that will cost jobs.
And the counter argument is if you pay, if you're paying too much, if you're paying them, an overly inflated fee, then you're not doing yourself any favor either, because it's creating jobs, but at what cost?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that this is all about politics, and it's all about unions predominantly supporting Democrats and providing money to Democrats and voting for Democrats. And if the Republicans can weaken unions, they can, in fact, weaken Democrats. Unfortunately, when we talk about economic development, there are things that can be done. I mean, if they weren't having these fights, there are actually things that Republicans and Democrats could probably get together and do that would really create jobs. Things like strategic spending on infrastructure. We have $300 million that was found recently that could be strategically spent in areas that would really
I didn't find it, by the way.
that would boost employment.
You look at the history of Republicans and Democrats. I mean, I grew up in Cook County, and it's really a sad commentary in a way, but the partisan interests seem in many cases to come before the interests of the general public.
And it is an election year. And there's a governor's seat at stake.
And what's more important than getting your guy elected?
Yeah.
Is it more important to benefit the general public? Is it more important to put people to work, or is it more important to get your candidate elected? Well, I think we all know the answer to that one.
Right. Well, I think we're going to just see more and more politics. We'll obviously cover those developments as they come about, along with the rest of the session, whatever they can accomplish.
Well, you've been doing a fine job keeping tabs on that, and I listen with interest as I hear you talk, because you're far more erudite on that particular matter than I am. So.
Okay, well, that'll do it for this week. Hope you're staying safe now that we're back in the winter. Our spring's over, so
drive safely out there.
Exactly, and we'll be back next week with another political roundtable.
Unless, of course, we don't drive safely.
That's right.